The council chamber of the Galactic Unity Forum hummed with its usual bureaucratic monotony. 700 delegates from across the spiral arm seated in perfect rows, waiting for something, anything, to break the tedium of another standard session. Commander Vrel of the Korthan Dominion stood at the central podium, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled crowd with practiced disdain. "Order," he announced, his voice carrying through the translators. "We gather today to address the human problem." Ah yes, the humans. Those bizarre bipedal creatures from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. They had been causing quite the stir lately, expanding faster than anyone had predicted, their colony ships popping up in systems previously considered too hostile, too remote, or too economically worthless for civilized species to bother with. Vrel pulled up the holographic display. In the past cycle alone, humanity has established 17 new settlements, 3 of which are in disputed territories. They refuse to acknowledge our mining claims, our territorial boundaries, or frankly, any of our very reasonable requests that they slow down and ask permission first. Ambassador Threx from the Valonian Collective leaned forward, her scales catching the light. Perhaps we should simply destroy their fleet? Show them what happens when primitive species overstep? We tried that, Vrel muttered, scrolling through reports. Battle Group 7 engaged a human cargo convoy near the Helios cluster. The cargo ship won. The cargo ship what? Won. Apparently, humans build their merchant vessels with the same philosophy they build their warships, which is to say, they build them like they expect someone to start shooting at any moment. The thing had armor plating, missile batteries, and a crew that responded to military-grade weapons fire by, and I quote, getting really annoyed. Nervous chittering rippled through the chamber. Senator Quillix from the Methane Breathers Union raised a tentacle. Surely we can negotiate? The humans must have diplomats, reasonable individuals who understand galactic law. Vrel's mandibles clicked in what might have been a laugh. They do have diplomats. In fact, Earth Central informed us they are sending their finest negotiator to resolve this situation peacefully. She should be arriving within the hour. Well then, Quillix bubbled optimistically. Perhaps this will be resolved through civilized discourse after all. Perhaps, Vrel said, though his tone suggested otherwise. The transport shuttle descended through the station's atmospheric shield exactly 63 minutes later, touching down with the kind of precision that suggested military training. The airlock cycled, pressure equalized, and the delegation doors opened. Ambassador Martinez stepped onto the platform, a woman of average human height with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a formal suit that somehow managed to look both diplomatic and vaguely threatening. She carried a briefcase in one hand, and a cage in the other. "Greetings," she said, her voice warm and pleasant, completely at odds with the looks of horror spreading through the greeting committee. "I am Ambassador Martinez, here to discuss territorial arrangements. I hope the accommodations are suitable. My colleague here can be particular about his lodgings." Inside the cage was what appeared to be a small mammalian creature, roughly the size of a domesticated companion animal. It had gray and white fur, small rounded ears, and was currently making a sound that could only be described as a growl mixed with a hiss mixed with pure distilled rage. "What?" Vrel said slowly. "Is that?" "This is Gerald," Martinez replied brightly. "He is a honey badger. A Mellivora capensis, if you prefer the scientific designation. Do not worry, he is perfectly safe." The creature called Gerald chose that moment to bite the bars of his cage with enough force to make them rattle. His small eyes fixed on Vrel, with what could only be described as murderous intent. "That does not seem safe," Threx observed. "Oh, Gerald would not hurt a fly," Martinez said, setting the cage down on a nearby table. "Unless the fly annoyed him, or looked at him wrong, or existed in his general vicinity during one of his moods. But otherwise, perfectly harmless." Vrel exchanged glances with Threx. This was already going poorly, and the actual negotiations had not even begun. They convened in Conference Room 7, a neutral space designed to make everyone equally uncomfortable. Martinez sat at one end of the long table, her briefcase open, Gerald's cage positioned directly beside her. The honey badger had settled into an ominous silence, watching the assembled aliens with unwavering focus. "Shall we begin?" Martinez asked pleasantly. "I understand there are concerns about humanity's expansion rate. Concerns, Vrel said flatly, is putting it mildly. You have violated 16 territorial agreements, ignored 23 cease and desist orders, and your merchant vessels keep ramming our patrol ships. In our defense, Martinez replied, your patrol ships keep getting in the way. Space is very large, you know. Plenty of room for everyone. We assumed you would move. We were conducting lawful interdictions. You were blocking shipping lanes. Tomato. She waved a hand dismissively. But I digress. You requested this meeting to discuss boundaries, yes? We are open to reasonable discussions. Senator Quillix inflated hopefully. That is excellent. Perhaps we could establish a buffer zone, a demilitarized region where both parties agree not to expand. We could, Martinez agreed. But we would not. The hope deflated. Literally, in Quillix's case. You have to understand our position, Martinez continued, pulling out several data tablets. Humanity operates on a very simple principle. We go where we want, we do what we want, and we generally prefer not to ask permission because, in our experience, asking permission just means listening to someone explain why we cannot do the thing we are already in the process of doing. That is not how galactic civilization works, Threx protested. Perhaps, Martinez said, galactic civilization needs to work differently. Gerald chose that moment to emit a low, rumbling growl, his eyes still fixed on Vrel. Your creature is staring at me, the commander noted uncomfortably. Gerald stares at everyone. He is trying to decide if you are a threat, food, or something to be mildly annoyed by. Given that you have not tried to take his cage, you are probably in the third category. For now. And if we were in one of the other categories? Martinez smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Then we would all have a very bad day. Honey badgers are fascinating creatures, Commander. They have been documented fighting animals 10 times their size. They hunt venomous snakes for entertainment. They have skins so thick that porcupine quills and bee stings barely penetrate. And perhaps most importantly, they do not care. Do not care about what? Anything. Consequences, threats, overwhelming odds. A honey badger sees an obstacle and decides that obstacle needs to be destroyed, permanently, with extreme prejudice. They are nature's answer to the question, what if we made a small mammal with the attitude of a capital warship and the survival instincts of a black hole? The silence that followed was profound. You brought a psychotic animal to a peace conference, Vrel said slowly. I brought a visual aid, Martinez corrected. Gerald here represents humanity's general approach to conflict resolution. When faced with something bigger, stronger, and theoretically more dangerous, we do not back down. We do not negotiate from a position of weakness. We bite, claw, and fight until either we win or the other party decides that continuing the fight costs more than any potential victory is worth. She leaned forward, her expression hardening. Earth is a death world, gentlemen. We evolved alongside creatures that could swallow us whole, poison us with a scratch, or hunt us across continents. We survived ice ages, plagues, and our own tendency to drop large explosives on each other. We are adaptable, stubborn, and frankly, too stupid to know when we are supposed to give up. And you want us to stop expanding because some ancient territorial treaty says a particular ball of frozen rock belongs to someone else? The treaty is 7,000 years old, Quillix protested, which proves our point. You had 7,000 years to do something with those territories and did not. We have been here for less than a century, and we have already established functioning colonies. Perhaps the real question is not why are the humans expanding so fast, but rather, why is everyone else so slow? Threx's scales had turned an alarming shade of purple. You cannot simply ignore millennia of established law. Watch us. Gerald rattled his cage again, as if emphasizing the point. Vrel felt a headache forming behind his primary eyes. What exactly do you want, Ambassador? What we have always wanted. To be left alone to do what we do best, which is thrive in places no sane species would consider habitable. You have thousands of systems. Beautiful, temperate worlds with breathable atmospheres and abundant resources. By all means, keep them. We will take the frozen wastes, the volcanic hellscapes, the radiation-soaked rocks orbiting dying stars. We will build there, we will flourish there, and in a few generations we will probably start complaining about how crowded those places are getting. That is insane. That is humanity. We terraform the unterraformable. We mine the unmined. We look at warning signs that say certain death beyond this point and think, sounds like a challenge. She paused. Also, we might accidentally solve several of your resource crisis situations in the process, so you are welcome in advance. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances. This was not how negotiations typically proceeded. Usually, there were threats, counter-threats, and eventually someone deployed a fleet. This, whatever this was, felt different, dangerous. Vrel cleared his throat. You understand that if we cannot reach an agreement, the Council will be forced to take military action? You can try, Martinez said simply. But before you commit to that particular course of action, I want you to consider something. Earth sent one ambassador to this station, one diplomat, carrying one briefcase, and one extremely irritated mammal. We did not send a fleet. We did not deploy warships on your borders. We sent me, and Gerald, because we wanted to be civilized about this. She stood, walking slowly around the table, her hand resting lightly on Gerald's cage. Now imagine what we would send if we stopped being civilized. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. You are threatening us, Threx said quietly. I am providing context, Martinez replied. Every species in this room has a concept of warfare. You send fleets, armies, calculated forces meant to achieve specific objectives with acceptable losses. Humans have that too. But we also have something else. Something that developed because we spent hundreds of thousands of years learning that sometimes the only way to survive is to burn everything down and start over. She tapped Gerald's cage gently. We call it total war. Not a skirmish over territory, not a police action, not a measured response. Everything. Every ship, every soldier, every resource we can muster, thrown at the problem until either we win or there is nothing left to fight for. And before you think I am exaggerating, I should mention that humans have fought wars where the death toll exceeded the entire population of some of your member species. We have used weapons that turn planets into glass. We have strategies with names like mutually assured destruction, and we develop them not for use against aliens, but for use against other humans. The silence was absolute. That is barbaric, Quillix whispered. That is survival, Martinez corrected softly. And before you judge us too harshly, remember that we are still here, still expanding, still thriving. Every attempt to slow us down, every battle group that tried to teach us our place, every dire warning about the consequences of defying galactic order, we are still here. She returned to her seat, folding her hands calmly. So here is my proposal. You leave us alone. We leave you alone. We take the systems you do not want, you keep the ones you do. We establish clear boundaries, enforce them firmly but fairly, and most importantly, we never have to find out what happens when humanity stops sending diplomats and starts sending something else. And if we refuse? Vrel asked, though his voice lacked conviction. Martinez smiled again, that same empty expression. Then Gerald and I will return to Earth, and I will inform my superiors that peaceful coexistence is not possible. And the next diplomatic mission will not arrive in a shuttle. Gerald, as if on cue, let out another growl, this one longer and somehow more threatening. The chamber erupted in frantic discussion. Delegates arguing in a dozen languages. Translation matrices struggling to keep up. Vrel watched Martinez carefully, noting how calm she remained, how absolutely certain she seemed that her position was unassailable. And the worst part? She was probably right. The Corthan Dominion had war-gamed a human conflict. The projections were not encouraging. Humanity's industrial base was growing exponentially, their technology advancing at a pace that defied conventional development curves. More troubling was their tactical doctrine, which seemed to consist of identify problem, apply overwhelming force, repeat until problem stops being a problem. They fought like Gerald looked like he wanted to fight, with absolute commitment and zero consideration for anything except victory. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Vrel raised a hand for silence. We will present your proposal to the full council, but understand that this is not a guarantee of acceptance. Understood, Martinez said graciously. Gerald and I will await your decision. We have reserved accommodations in the diplomatic quarter, though I should mention that Gerald requires fresh meat for his meals. Raw, if possible. He gets testy when his food is overcooked. Of course, Vrel said weakly. As Martinez gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Threx leaned close to Vrel, her voice barely audible. Are we actually considering negotiating with someone who brought a hostile animal as a negotiating tactic? That is not an animal, Vrel murmured back. That is a warning, and we would be fools to ignore it. Martinez paused at the doorway, Gerald's cage in hand. Oh, one more thing, she said casually. I know what some of you are thinking. Maybe the humans are bluffing. Maybe this is all theater meant to intimidate us into concessions. Maybe we should test their resolve, see how far we can push before they actually retaliate. She turned, her expression pleasant, but her eyes absolutely glacial. Please do not. Gerald here is actually the reasonable option. There were other proposals for this diplomatic mission. Proposals that involved significantly less talking and significantly more demonstrations of human military capability. I argued strongly for the diplomatic approach. I convinced my superiors that civilized negotiation was possible. Do not make me look foolish. Then she was gone, the door sliding shut behind her, leaving 700 very disturbed delegates in her wake. Vrel collapsed into his seat, feeling older than his years. Motion to accept the human proposal, he said, tiredly. 400 hands, tentacles, and appendages rose immediately. Motion passes. Someone draft a treaty. And for the love of the cosmos, make sure the humans get their marginal systems. All of them. Every frozen rock they want. Just keep them happy. What about our mining interests in those regions? Quillix asked. Consider them a small price to pay for not finding out what humanity sends when they stop being diplomatic. The session adjourned shortly after, delegates filing out in subdued groups, already composing messages to their respective governments, explaining why territorial concessions to a species that had been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries was actually a brilliant strategic move. Meanwhile, in her assigned quarters, Ambassador Martinez prepared her own report, Gerald finally released from his cage, and currently investigating a corner with intense suspicion. That went well, she said to no one in particular. Gerald made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been a threat to future furniture. Martinez smiled. Tomorrow would bring the formal negotiations, the detailed treaty work, the tedious process of actually implementing what today's rather theatrical presentation had set in motion. But for now, she had successfully conveyed humanity's position without anyone getting shot, bitten, or blown up, which, by human diplomatic standards, counted as a resounding success. She glanced at Gerald, who had finished his investigation and was now demanding food with increasingly aggressive vocalizations. You know what? She said, opening a container of fresh meat. You earned this. Gerald consumed his dinner with the same intensity he approached everything else, which is to say, violently and without mercy. Watching him, Martinez could not help but laugh. They really had sent the perfect representative. The Treaty of Shared Skies, as it came to be reluctantly called, took exactly 4 days to finalize. 4 days of Martinez, sitting across from increasingly exhausted council representatives. Gerald, providing ambient menace from his corner of the room, and humanity securing every single concession they had quietly hoped for but never expected to actually get. On the morning of Day 5, Vrel found himself signing documents that would have made his ancestors weep. 347 star systems, most of them classified as uninhabitable by every reasonable metric, now officially belonged to human jurisdiction. The kicker? The council had agreed to it unanimously. This is humiliating, Threx muttered as she applied her biosignature to the digital treaty. Her scales had maintained that unfortunate purple hue for the entire negotiation period. This is pragmatic, Vrel corrected, though his mandibles clicked with suppressed irritation. We are giving them systems we never wanted in the first place. And if they actually make something of those wastelands, then we will have established ourselves as reasonable neighbors who honored our agreements, which is considerably better than the alternative. The alternative being war with a species that apparently viewed suicidal odds as motivational. Martinez accepted the finalized treaty with grace, downloaded it to 3 separate data cores with suspicious efficiency, and extended a hand to Vrel in the human gesture of agreement. Pleasure doing business with you, Commander. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful, mutually beneficial relationship where we stay on our side of space and you stay on yours." Vrel clasped her hand briefly, noting the surprising strength in her grip. "I certainly hope so, Ambassador. Though I suspect we will be seeing more of each other in the future." "Oh, absolutely. Earth Central is already planning the next wave of colony expeditions. But do not worry," she added with that unsettling smile. "We will stick to our assigned hellscapes. We would not want to violate our brand new treaty." Gerald, who had been remarkably well behaved during the actual signing ceremony, chose that moment to knock over a decorative vase with what appeared to be deliberate malice. "My apologies," Martinez said, not sounding apologetic at all. "Gerald has strong opinions about Valonian pottery." "How could he possibly?" Threx began. "We may never know. The mysteries of the honey badger mind are beyond mortal comprehension." As Martinez and her chaos agent departed, Vrel allowed himself a moment of relief. The human situation was resolved. No shots fired, no fleets mobilized, just one very effective diplomat and her psychotic mammal. He should have known better. 3 weeks later, Admiral Kresh of the 7th Enforcement Fleet received orders that made his primary brain hurt. Patrol the human territories. Observe only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Do not interfere with human operations. Basically, fly around and watch the primitives do whatever insane thing they were planning. Kresh was a military officer with 40 years of distinguished service. He had fought in 7 campaigns, commanded vessels ranging from scouts to dreadnoughts, and earned enough commendations to fill a storage bay. This assignment felt like babysitting. "Sensors, what are we looking at?" he asked as the fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the first human colony system. "Multiple installations on 4 planets and 6 moons, sir. Active mining operations on 3 asteroid belts. Significant orbital traffic. And, something strange on the 4th planet." "Define strange, Lieutenant." The view screen shifted, focusing on a world that looked like it had been specifically designed to murder anything foolish enough to land there. Sulfuric atmosphere, surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead, crushing gravity that would flatten most species into paste. And on that hellscape, humans had built a city. Not an outpost, not a research station. A city. Glowing through the toxic clouds, structures that stretched toward the boiling sky. Transport craft moving between platforms like insects around a hive. "How is that possible?" Kresh whispered. "According to our scans, they are using atmospheric processors to create localized breathable zones, reinforced habitats rated for extreme pressure, and what appears to be geothermal power generation on a scale we have never seen. Sir, they are not just surviving down there, they are thriving." Kresh pulled up the treaty documentation. Yes. This system was definitely on the list of territories humanity had claimed. One of the worthless ones. The ones the Council had been happy to surrender. Except it was not worthless anymore. "Communications, get me whoever is in charge down there." The response came through within minutes. A video feed showing a woman with grease stains on her face and a hard hat bearing the inscription "Safety Third." "This is Director Patel of New Mumbai Station. What can I do for you, Admiral?" "I am conducting a routine patrol of the region," Kresh said carefully. "Your operations here are quite impressive. How many personnel do you have stationed on this world?" "Currently, about 40,000, give or take. We just opened 3 new processing facilities, so the population has been growing faster than projected. Should hit 100,000 within 2 years if the expansion continues on schedule." 40,000. 40,000 humans living on a planet that would kill his people in under 30 seconds. "That is remarkable," he managed. "Oh, this is nothing. You should see New Siberia. That is the colony on the ice world in Sector 12. Makes this place look tropical. They are having temperature control issues because it keeps dropping below -200. The colonists are complaining their coffee freezes before they can drink it." She laughed like this was amusing rather than horrifying. "And people volunteer to live in these conditions?" "Volunteer, Admiral? We have waiting lists. Turns out there are a lot of humans who look at a planet that actively tries to kill you and think, yeah, that sounds like a good challenge. Plus, the hazard pay is excellent." Kresh ended the communication feeling deeply unsettled. He had assumed the human expansion would slow once they realized how difficult their claimed territories actually were. He had not accounted for the possibility that humans considered difficulty a feature rather than a bug. The patrol continued through 6 more systems, each one revealing some new horror of human adaptability. A colony built inside an active volcano. Mining operations in an asteroid field with gravitational anomalies that made navigation a nightmare. A research station orbiting a black hole, studying radiation that would sterilize any other species. And everywhere, humans, working, building, expanding, complaining about minor inconveniences like solar flares and toxic atmospheres the way Kresh complained about cafeteria food. "Sir," his executive officer said quietly on the 7th day of patrol, "I think we may have made a strategic error." "You think?" "We gave them the systems we did not want because we assumed they were useless. But humans do not define useless the same way we do. They are turning liabilities into assets. In another decade, they will control some of the richest resource territories in this sector simply because no one else wanted to put in the effort to exploit them." Kresh leaned back in his command chair, a terrible realization forming. The ambassador knew. Martinez knew exactly what those systems were worth. Not now, but eventually. With human determination and human disregard for reasonable safety standards. "She played us, sir." "No," she negotiated. "We were simply too blinded by our own assumptions about what constitutes a desirable territory to realize we were handing them the foundation of an empire." Back on the council station, Vrel received Admiral Kresh's preliminary report and experienced several emotions simultaneously: anger, grudging respect, and a growing suspicion that the human situation was far from resolved. He called an emergency session. "They are everywhere," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Every system we seeded, every worthless rock we thought we were dumping on them, they have colonized, aggressively, efficiently, and apparently, joyfully." "So what?" Senator Quillix bubbled. "We gave them those systems. The treaty is clear. The treaty gave them space to expand. It did not account for how fast they would expand, or what they would build in that space. In 20 years, human industrial capacity in their assigned territories will exceed our own. In 50, they will be the dominant economic power in this entire sector." Based on what projections? Based on the fact that they are currently building cities on planets that would kill us if we breathed the air. They are not limited by habitability concerns. They just engineer around problems that would stop any rational species. And we gave them permission to do exactly that. The chamber erupted in panicked discussion. Several delegates demanded an immediate renegotiation of the treaty. Others suggested military intervention before human expansion became unstoppable. Vrel let them argue for exactly 10 minutes before calling for silence. "There will be no renegotiation. There will be no military action. We signed a treaty, they are honoring that treaty, and any attempt to alter the terms now would make us look like the unreasonable party. Worse, it would prove Ambassador Martinez right." "Right about what?" Threx demanded. "About us. That we only respect agreements when they favor us. That we cannot be trusted to honor our word. And that the only language we truly understand is force." He paused. "And if we demonstrate that force is necessary, the humans will respond with force. Are we prepared for that outcome?" The silence was answer. "Enough. Then we proceed as planned. We honor the treaty, maintain diplomatic channels, and adapt to the new reality that humanity is now a major power in this region." "This is surrender," someone muttered from the back rows. "This is survival," Vrel corrected. "There is a difference." The meeting adjourned with no clear resolution. Delegates returning to their respective governments to explain how they had accidentally created a rival superpower by giving away territories they considered worthless. Martinez, meanwhile, was already on her next assignment. The Tyloran Confederacy had lodged complaints about human mining operations near their borders. Apparently, humanity's definition of near and everyone else's definition of near differed significantly. She arrived at the Tyloran homeworld with the usual diplomatic credentials, the usual formal briefcase, and a new travel companion. Not Gerald. Gerald was enjoying a well-deserved vacation at a wildlife preserve on Earth, terrorizing the staff and eating everything not nailed down. Her new companion was named Boris. He was a wolverine. "Absolutely not," the Tyloran ambassador declared when he saw the cage. We will not negotiate with someone who brings wild animals to diplomatic functions. Boris is a service animal, Martinez replied innocently. He provides emotional support. He is growling at my security detail. He growls when he is happy. It means he likes them. That is not what that means, and you know it. Martinez set down Boris's cage with a gentle thump. The wolverine inside fixed the ambassador with a stare that suggested he was mentally calculating attack vectors. Shall we discuss your border concerns? Martinez asked pleasantly. I believe there has been some confusion about the demarcation coordinates. The Tyloran ambassador looked at Boris. He looked at Martinez. He pulled up the border dispute files and realized, with growing horror, that the humans were technically correct about the coordinates. The treaty language is ambiguous, he tried weakly. The treaty language is precise, Martinez corrected. 3.7 astronomical units from your outermost registered colony. Our mining operations are at 3.9 astronomical units, well within legal boundaries. But the spirit of the agreement is that we both honor the actual words we signed. Unless you would prefer we renegotiate from scratch, Boris and I have time. Boris rattled his cage menacingly. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. The Tyloran Confederacy withdrew their complaint. Martinez returned to her ship with a satisfied smile and a wolverine who looked vaguely disappointed that no one had tried anything violent. News of the Tyloran capitulation spread through diplomatic channels at light speed. A pattern was emerging, and it was not one the galactic community found comforting. Humanity negotiated hard, backed their positions with legal precision and barely contained threat displays, and never, ever backed down. They also had an inexplicable fondness for bringing aggressive mammals to formal functions. The council convened once more, this time to discuss what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say out loud. Are we actually afraid of the humans? Quillix asked. Fear is too strong a word, Vrel hedged. We rearranged our entire territorial policy because one woman brought a small angry mammal to a negotiation, Threx pointed out. That sounds like fear to me. That sounds like prudent risk assessment, Vrel insisted. They demonstrated resolve, capability, and a willingness to fight for what they wanted. We chose accommodation over conflict. That is rational policymaking. And now they control 347 systems, have a booming colonial economy, and apparently an unlimited supply of terrifying animals to bring to meetings. The animals are beside the point. Are they, though? Senator Quillix inflated thoughtfully. I have been researching Earth wildlife. Do you know what else lives on that planet? Creatures called bears that can weigh 800 pounds and run 30 miles per hour. Reptiles called crocodiles that have bite forces exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch. Insects called bullet ants, whose sting is described as being shot. And those are just the ones I found in the first hour of research. Your point? My point is that humans evolved on a planet actively trying to murder them, alongside creatures designed to murder each other, and they became the dominant species anyway. The animals Ambassador Martinez brings are not props. They are reminders. Reminders that humanity came from a world where everything is dangerous, and they still won. The silence that followed was contemplative. So what do we do? Someone asked. Vrel considered the question carefully. They could continue trying to contain human expansion, which would likely fail and possibly trigger the exact conflict they wanted to avoid. They could accept humanity as equals, which meant surrendering the comfortable assumption of galactic dominance his people had enjoyed for millennia. Or they could adapt. We learn, he said finally. We study how they turn impossible territories into thriving colonies. We understand their risk tolerance, their innovation cycles, their cultural drivers, and we find ways to benefit from human expansion rather than being threatened by it. You want to work with them, I want to survive them. There is a difference, and not understanding that difference is how species end up extinct. 2 years later, the Galactic Unity Forum looked considerably different. Humanity held full membership status, 3 permanent seats on the Security Council, and enough economic leverage to influence policy across the entire sector. Ambassador Martinez had been promoted to Diplomatic Corps Director, overseeing negotiations across multiple species and territories. She no longer brought animals to meetings, which everyone agreed was a positive development. mostly because she did not need to anymore. The message had been received, understood, and thoroughly internalized. Humanity was here. They were not leaving, and attempting to push them around would end badly for everyone involved. Commander Vrel, now promoted to council chair, found himself working alongside human delegates regularly. It was, he had to admit, not entirely unpleasant. Humans brought fresh perspectives, innovative solutions, and a frankly alarming enthusiasm for solving problems everyone else considered unsolvable. They also brought excellent coffee, which Vrel had developed an unfortunate addiction to. "How is Gerald doing?" he asked Martinez during one joint policy session. "Retired to a sanctuary on Earth, living his best life, terrifying volunteers and eating premium meat. He sends his regards." She paused. "Actually, he does not. Gerald does not send regards. But if he did, I am sure they would be vaguely threatening." Vrel's mandibles clicked in amusement. "I still cannot believe your government approved that diplomatic strategy." "Oh, the animal approach was entirely my idea. Command wanted me to bring a fleet demonstration, show off our military capabilities, that sort of thing. I convinced them that bringing Gerald would be more effective and considerably less expensive. And they agreed?" "They agreed after I explained that Gerald represents humanity's core diplomatic principle. We prefer peaceful resolution, but we will fight if necessary, and we fight like creatures that have nothing to lose and everything to prove." She smiled. "Also, Gerald was available on short notice, and spacecraft fuel is expensive. Practical and theatrical. A dangerous combination. That is humanity in general. We are excellent at making drama serve functional purposes." The meeting continued, covering trade agreements, colonial coordination, and mutual defense protocols. The kind of boring, essential work that kept civilizations running smoothly. 5 years ago, this would have been impossible. 5 years ago, the Council would have gone to war rather than accept humanity as equals. One diplomatic mission, one briefcase, and one absolutely fearless mammal had changed everything. As the session adjourned, Vrel walked alongside Martinez toward the transportation hub, comfortable in the strange friendship that had developed between former adversaries. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Of course. That first meeting, when you brought Gerald, were you actually prepared to fight if negotiations failed?" Martinez stopped walking, her expression thoughtful. "Commander, humanity had 47 warships operational at that time. Your fleet numbered in the thousands. Any military conflict would have been devastating for us in the short term, possibly extinction level. Then why risk confrontation? Because backing down would have been worse. We learned a long time ago that showing weakness invites aggression, that predators target prey that runs. So we do not run. We stand our ground, we growl, and we make it very clear that hurting us will cost more than anyone wants to pay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not, but at least we control our own fate." She smiled. "Plus, I really did think Gerald would make an impression. He certainly did that." They reached the transport platform, preparing to go their separate ways. "For what it is worth," Vrel said, "I am glad we chose negotiation." "So am I. War is expensive, boring, and the paperwork is absolutely nightmarish. Much better to be friends. Friends with an implicit understanding that crossing you would be catastrophic. All the best friendships have that understanding," Martinez said cheerfully. She boarded her transport, heading back to Earth to brief her superiors on the latest round of successful negotiations. Vrel returned to his office, pulled up the latest reports on human colonial expansion, and allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The war had ended before it started because one very smart human understood something fundamental about conflict. Victory was not about destroying your enemy. It was about making your enemy choose not to fight in the first place. And sometimes, all it took was one diplomat and one very angry honey badger to deliver that message effectively. The Galactic Unity Forum continued its work, now with humanity as full partners rather than potential adversaries. Trade flourished, colonies expanded, and slowly, carefully, different species learned to coexist despite vastly different perspectives on what constituted reasonable living conditions. And in a sanctuary on Earth, Gerald lived out his days in comfortable retirement, completely unaware that he had, in his own small way, prevented an interstellar war and reshaped galactic politics. He probably would not have cared even if he knew. Honey badgers never do.